So we're going to continue talking about the sugya of names now. Tonight, in particular, I want to focus on the idea of having two names. Today, it's super, super common. A lot of people have two names. Some people have three names, four names, all sorts of combinations. But I want to talk about where that started, who was pro, who was against, and a little bit like the development of this minhag. Now, it's interesting is that the Chazon Ish, which is very recent, was against two names. Although the Chazon Ish himself had two names, his name was Avram Yeshaya, he had two names, but the Chazon Ish was against two names, and he had an interesting rationale. He said that it's built on a little bit of a lamdus. He said like this, the Chazon Ish says, if you take a name, you want to name Avram after your father, a person's father, and you want to name Yaakov after your person's father-in-law, and you put together Avram Yaakov, and now you have a new name. He says Avram Yaakov is not Avram or Yaakov, it's Avram Yaakov. It's a new name. It's not, you didn't do, like there's no way to bridge that gap. You can't have one, it's not, you didn't do anything. That's problem number one. And secondly, the Chazon Ish says that what ends up happening is usually one of the names is the name that sticks, the other name nobody knows about, and you're just opening yourself up to all sorts of shilas. If Le'aleinu, the person who's named, ends up, not Le'aleinu, but Ksuba was usually early enough when you still know both his names, but if he needs a get, or a child of his needs a get, or it just makes complications, and you can end up having a name that's forgotten, that could be a psul in a document later on, and we don't want stam extra complications. So don't give two names. That was the Chazon Ish's opinion. I think Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky also was not the biggest fan of two names. He felt like it fajumbles koiches. Like you take a name that is this koiches, a name that is this koiches, and you just haphazardly, glue them together. It fajumbles the koiches. I saw brought down b'shem different mekubalim. Avigdor Nebenzahl, the Rav of the old city in Yerushalayim, was against two names. There's various different people who are like against two names. What's interesting is a lot of them either had two names themselves or have close family members that have two names. For example, the Chazon Ish, his name was Avram Yeshaya. Rav Chaim Kanievsky's name was Shmaryo Yosef Chaim. Right, it's the Stipler. Well, the Stipler didn't get. The Stipler was named before he knew the Chazon Ish, but Rav Chaim wasn't named. No, but Rav Chaim wasn't named after he knew the Chazon Ish already. Who? Who? Yeah, the Chazon Ish didn't have a choice. No, but Rav Chaim was like his spiritual anical. You know what I'm saying? Rav Chaim was like his spiritual anical. He is Yaakov Yisrael, but that was again given by his parents. The point is that a lot of the people who had a snagdus to two names themselves had two names, or their children had two names. So it's not like a strong hisnagdus. It's like a vague hisnagdus. And I saw b'shem Rabbi Yashiv and other poskim that Klal Yisrael did not accept this position against two names. And today, two names is in good standing. There's nothing wrong with it, and anyone can give 2-3 names. It's fine. Rabbi Yashiv himself named several of his children with more than one name, meaning it's an okay practice. Now let's just chart a little bit where it starts from and how it developed. Now, it's interesting, if you look through the psukim, let's say start with the Avis and the Shvatim and, throughout Navi, you'll see everyone has one name. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, right? Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, v'chulu. In Navi, David, Shlomo, Shmuel, Chizkiah, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel. Nobody has two names. Everybody, all the famous biblical names that come from the Torah and the Nevi'im, is all one name. It seems to be very prevalent to have one name. If you look through Shas, for example, regular, just off the top of the head survey, you want to do Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon. Everyone, again, one name. No, nothing pops into your head of like a famous person who had if you're thinking like Shas, Psukim, even Gedolei HaPais, even Rishonim, for example. Think Rishonim, Bali HaTosfos, right? Rashi was Rabbi Shlomo. Rabbi Natan was Rabbi Yaakov, the Rashbam was Rabbi Shmuel, the Rambam was Rabbi Moshe, the Ramban was Rabbi Moshe. None of these famous Rishonim. The Rosh was Rabbeinu Asher, the Rambam is Rabbeinu Mordechai, the Mordechai was Mordechai, right? So there's all these famous things that you could think of, all have one name. It seems to be very, very uncommon. Now, because of this, some of the Gedolei HaPoskim, brand name Chuvas, the Chassam Sofer, the Ned Yehuda, etc., write about this, and write not with his snagdus, but just almost like an observation that two names is a new phenomenon. I want to start with the Ned Yehuda's Chuvah. It's a fascinating Chuvah. The Chuvah to the Ned Yehuda is written to him. The Shoyel is Rabbi Shaya Pick, Rabbi Shaya Berlin Pick. He's the one who did the Maseres Hashas on the side of the Gemaras, the cross comparison where everything is. So, and this is before it's our Chachma and computers. So suffice to say, he was a certified genius, right? You're talking about a very high tier genius, and he loved to do this type of cross comparison work. Like where does it say like almost like trivia and like like these type of things. So he wrote a tshuva to Neidu Yehuda, asking Neidu Yehuda about the name Beribi. Sometimes you see in Shas the name Beribi. He wants to know, is that a name? Is it a title? What is the name Beribi? Now the Yehuda writes as follows: Mechtavei Atar, I received v'yan hu davar she'einu nachatz l'hashiv l'maisa. It's not a halacha shayla. This is a trivia question. L'chein ekvuni atir this milayim b'dvarav. The Neidu Yehuda basically says, I'm a busy Rav. I'm a practicing Rav. This is interesting. It's a trivia question, but it's not something that I was able to dedicate time. So it took me there was a little bit of a delay in responding. But ad Shavuot, however, till this last week, lekachti k'tzas pnai v'nisi b'dvar v'nachmadim. I took a look at it. Asher hergish b'stiris tevi Rashi al beribi and niska b'shas. You were aimed on a steer in Rashi. Sometimes Rashi says beribi is a title, and sometimes Rashi seems to say it's a shame. Is it a shame or is it a title? Then he continues on. He says the Marshal was already aimed on this question. He brings a few examples of beribi. And he basically ends up saying that there's two types of uses of beribi. Beribi could sometimes be a title, and beribi could sometimes be a shem hatzim, it could be a name. He says when it's attached to a name, like it's a Eliezer beribi, so it means beribi is a title. Beribi means Gad Ladar. It's a Eliezer the Gad Ladar. When you just see beribi omer, beribi says, so that's the name, meaning beribi was a name, but beribi is also a title. It's a word that had more than one use. Now, it becomes actually a big tumult because there's one of the most famous paitanim. It's Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir, right? All the piyutim, so many kinnis and piyutim that we say is from Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir. Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir's name is Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir Beribi. And some of the kinnis or piyutim, he signs acrostically, meaning like if you look at the first letter of each, stanza, will add up to his name. And the name will be Eliezer HaKalir Beribi. Now, if Beribi means Gad Ladar, nobody signs off their own name. Eliezer the Gad Ladar. That's not socially how one, signs their name. So it becomes a question, what does beribi mean? And the Neidu Yehuda handles this. It's just an interesting question. But that's all like the part of the tshuva that's not really relevant to us. This is Rav Eliezer HaKalir. So he says like this. At the end of, in the middle of it, he has this little thing. The Neidu Yehuda, who's writing to Rishai Pik, Neidu Yehuda himself had a pretty solid memory, as evidenced by his vast literary output. But he writes, with my weak memory, he says, probably Rabbi Shaya Pik was a famous Zachron. I mean, Rabbi Shaya Pik was someone who everybody knew, had a once-in-a-generation memory, and the Neidu Yehuda was like hedging. Maybe Rabbi Shaya Pik has a maramakim. There's like, that's what I imagine is going on. Neidu Yehuda writes, with my weak memory, in any zeicha b'shum makom b'shas, I don't remember anywhere in Shas, Shum Tana or Amira, not a single Tana or Amira, Shayiniska b'shnei shemis, v'shneim shem atzim. I don't know of any Tana or Amira who had two names, and they're both essential names. Zulasi Abishol, Abu Yosi. V'gam ze ein shnei shemis, ki Abba l'daiti ein shem atzim, rak shem atayr. Abba's a title also. Abba means like the Rebbe. Abba means Rebbe. And the Neidu Yehuda does not quote this, but the Rambam in his Hakdama to Pirush Mishnayos writes about how Rebbe, the editor of the Mishnah, decided to refer to different people, and he writes about the structure of the titles, and he writes how Rebbe referred to, there's 6 tiers to titles in Shas, in Mishnayos. Rebbe gave the 6 tiers to titles. There's the Shema, I think Gadol Mirabban Shmai, just the name is the biggest, meaning like the name is the biggest. Then there's Rabban, then there's Rebbe. I don't remember all 6 offhand, but he has 6 titles. And in there, by one of them, by Rabban or by Rebbe, he says that an alternate for that could be Abba. Meaning like an alternate, a tier 3, title could be swapped for Abba. So the Neidu Yehuda doesn't quote this Rambam, but he's mechavan to the Rambam, that Abba is just like a surname, it's a title. It's like saying Rebbe. Now, we'll see that that's problematic. We'll see in a second. But he says, I believe he says, nobody called with 2 names. Even in the times of the Psukim, they weren't so rugged. Now the Neidu Yehuda with every word, he's medayik. The Neidu Yehuda seems to say, there was nothing. Bisman Mikra, there might have been some. Now, I'll show you soon, there's someone who compiled the whole list, and in Divrei Hayamim, there are a few names that are questionable, if they're 2 names, if they're 1 name, if they're 2 words. 1 word, Neidu Yehuda is like being nizr, like with his bemetek lashoni, with his careful way he's writing, he's being nizr. He's saying, Tanam and Aram 0, and very interesting that Neidu Yehuda, like every word is counted out. I am Sachim Chulin, Abmeh Tanam and Aram, Ladaiti, Lahir Regilim Klal. Meh Tanam and Aram, Ladaiti, the Neidu Yehuda says it wasn't at all prevalent to have 2 names. So this is the Neidu Yehuda who starts off this idea. He writes that 2 names is something that he doesn't really know where it started per se. He doesn't say who the first one to have it is or the first generation to do it. He just says, I'm doing a scan with my limited memory, and I don't remember, it being there. Now, I'm going to digress now. This is not what I planned on saying tonight, but it's just, I have to share one nakud over here. I'm talking about the Noda B'Yehuda and his limited memory and his every word. It's a nothing to do with this. It's just something my father always says over. It's a great zach. The Noda B'Yehuda in Yeridei Tinyana has a tshuva yod. It's a famous tshuva about hunting. Is a Jew allowed to hunt or not? The Noda B'Yehuda goes through the various parts. You know this? No. You know the tshuva? Yeah. This part it's a knetch. He goes through all the various parts, the shaila of hunting, tzar b'lachayim, and being mafsid things for no reason, and putting yourself in sakana, all the various parts of the tshuva, and then he gets to the hashkafa part of the tshuva. And he writes, but l'maisa, hunting is not nishkin yiddish ezach. It's not something Jews do. Hunting's a gayish ezach, he says. He says, you want to know how I know this? He says, lematzinu in the Torah, anybody who's hunting. Lematzinu in the Torah, anybody who's hunting, except for Esav and Nimrod and other such legendary villains. But we don't find anybody of good stature, anybody who's in good standing, engaged in hunting. And he says, and then he throws in a line over there and he says, V'al tedameli be'etzes hanidmis ketavya. Don't give me excuses that appear like a fleeting deer, meaning which is a terminology. Don't give me excuses that appear like a fleeting deer, and then tell me else why, because this is what I believe. This is what he says. Now the kasha is, and Achronim asks this on him, is that there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin that describes Sukkim that refer to David HaMelech, and it says that David HaMelech, when Hashem wanted to punish him, Hashem sent him on a wild goose chase, and it says David HaMelech was camped out and he saw a deer and he tried to shoot at it, and he wasn't able to catch it, and he chased it, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin explains that the deer was really the Satan who was meant to draw David HaMelech out into a dangerous place, and David HaMelech ends up getting captured, and it's a whole story in the Navi. Now, l'chaira, you see over there that David HaMelech might have been a hunter, right? And the Noda B'Yehuda seemingly is missing this Gemara in Sanhedrin. Now, what's fascinating is the Gemara in Sanhedrin that describes the story of David HaMelech describes it as follows. It says, Asa Satan, the Satan came, Idmele Ketavya. He appeared like a deer, and David HaMelech chased him. And he followed him, and he ended up being in danger. I'm pretty sure there's no other place in Shas where the lashon of Idmele Ketavya appears. It's the only place in Shas that sprach, Idmele Ketavya, that the Satan came like a deer, appears in Shas. So Noda B'Yehuda, who holds for whatever reason that Gemara is not a good sushtel, writes in one line over there, Al Tadami be'etzes hanidmis ketavya. He doesn't say the Gemara, he doesn't say David HaMelech, doesn't talk about it, he ignores it, but he's not missing the Gemara. It's the only time, so when we're talking about it's a fascinating thing. I think it's my father's the hair. It's a whatever. But it's just when we're talking about the Noda B'Yehuda and the dichonis of his words, and exactly just something to keep in mind. Now, moving along, the Chasam Sofer in a Tshuva and Even Ezer, he says even more in detail, a little more explicitly than the Noda B'Yehuda. He says as follows. He says, "Va'od nirali the lefnim loyhei noyig in lekreis b'shnei shemes v'asachas." Nobody used to give. Back in the day, he says, he doesn't say, back in the day, nobody gave. Ki chadashim mikarabo. New people came. Vafilu Yaakov vinu alav Hashem lematzinu shenikra Yaakov Yisrael b'pamachas. We don't find Yaakov called Yaakov Yisrael. It's Yaakov, and then leikaroid shimcha Yaakov. Eli Yisrael kisarisa. Right? We changed the Torah changes his name. Hashem changes his name.
We see places where they're not. It's not be like say like Yisrael will have multiple names.
Yeah, we do see that. We'll try to address that. But if for example Avram Avinu gets his name changed, leikara shmai shimcha Avram. Avraham. The Gemara in Bracha says, Kalakayru la Avram. It's terrible, right? Sarai, Sarah, these are names that get changed. They're not two names. He says, you don't see people having two names. That's quite a statement to make. All the names that are listed in Shas, Tanakh, and the Paiskim, which is stretching it a further level, because the Chasam when he says Paiskim, that gets you all the way to, to 500 years till 500 years ago or something like that. You don't find anyone who's called at the same time two names. Shili Yivamis. Then he brings a few examples. There's Gemara in Yivamis and Tavkuf Chav Beis that says Kach Kair Naisi Be'iri. There's Gemara over there that says they call me in my city Yochanan ben Yonis and Aryeh. Sounds like his name was Yonis and Aryeh. This person says. So when the High Aryeh Einenu Shem Atzim Klal Kiyim Torah Mishpacha Shem Gvurasam. There was a strong family. They called them the Aryeh family because they were strong. Says it's not a Shem Atzim. He gives a few more exampple, Abishal, Abayudan, the same ones as the Noda B'Yehuda gives. Then he says these are all, these are not two names, these are either titles or surnames or last names or characteristics, they're not two names. Then he brings an interesting raya. There's a shikl famous Yam Shlomo. He says, V'chein mashma Yam Shlomo. He brings a Marshal. The Marshal in Gittin in the fourth parak, in Simon Chavav, says as follows. He says a story about his own great-grandfather, who was looking for had a name conundrum. Shekasa Maisa Sha'av Ratza Likreis Haben B'Shem Aviv Meir. He wanted to call the son that was born after his father's name Meir. V'ha'im Ratza Likreis B'Shem Aviyah Yair. It was a fight. The Shver who was not alive was named Yair. The father who was not alive was called Meir, and they were having a fight about this. And Mizeh Noilad Shem Chadash Shneir. The name Shneir is Shnei Ar. Meir means light. Yair means light. Shnei Ar is two lights. So whoever the Paisik, the ingenious Rav that they spoke to said, "Oh, you have a problem, Meir, Yair, Shneir." Everybody's happy. You have both now. This is what the Yam Shalom brings down. It's a personal story. It's actually about his great grandparents, one great grandparent, and this is a story that the Marshal brings down. So the Chum Sefer interprets from this. Advice it was not an appropriate solution to say, "Why don't you just give two names? You have a problem, Meir, Yair, so just name the kid Meir, Yair, Yair, Meir. What's it? Just figure it out." Maybe they were arguing Mibaresh. Maybe the couple couldn't even exist. They couldn't even agree which name should go first. I don't know. But this is what the Chum Sefer infers from this Yam Shalema. The Advice says giving two names was not an option. Now, many come later, and you could be matcha this, and you could say maybe they held like the Chazon Ish, that two names is nothing, meaning to give Meir Yair is no one's happy, meaning you didn't do anything. Each one wanted just their name, not the other name. So, it's Nishti Nishter. Then he brings something else. He says, El al karchach leinogu came bizmanenu adayin. Advice says in those days they didn't do it yet. V'chein b'sefer Nachla Shiva. The Nachla Shiva is a Talmud of the Taz. He brings, the Nachla Shiva writes, Hey al derech hapela. The Nachla Shiva says, I heard that there are some people who have two names, and I even know one person who has two names. That's what he writes. This is a Talmud of the Taz. So this is like in the 1600s, early 1600s, mid 1600s. He's writing like, it's a strange thing. I heard of this. It's a new minhag to give two names. I even know someone with two names. This is what the Nachla Shiva writes. The Chum Sefer says it's pretty conclusive from the Marshal and the Nachla Shiva, and from his own vast knowledge of Shas and Paiskim and Nevi'im and Ksuvim, that there's no such a phenomenon to give two names in this way. Now, what's interesting is that there are, I can't find it now. I had it opened up here. The Nachla Shiva, there are three. The Marshal had two names. His name was I think Reb Shmuel Eliezer Eidlis. Eidlis is really a third name. Eidlis is after his mother-in-law, whose name was Edel, who supported him. So he took her name as a surname. Shmuel Eliezer Eidlis. The Birchas HaZevach was a Shmuel something Kaidenover. There was another Achron with two names, and there's a third one. Some of the Gedolei Achronim, like in that generation, what do you say? The Taisis Yamtiv? Yamtiv Lipa Helman? Lipma? I don't know if that's a second name or that's a German name. I'm not sure, but there's a few of the Gedolei Achronim that seem to have had second names like early on in that tkufa. Now, there's a big chacham by the name of Reuben Margolius. He wrote a sefer on Sanhedrin Margolius Ayam, a prolific mechaber, a goin, real goin. He was like a librarian in Tel Aviv. I think he worked in a farm store in Poland, and then when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he was a librarian in Tel Aviv. A very understated, like under the radar type of person, but he really knew everything. So he has a sefer called Lecheker Shemes V'Kinuyim B'Talmud, like the origin of names and kinuyim in the Talmud. And the last chapter, Parak Yedalid, in the sefer, is about people who had two names. And he does not like this presentation from the Nadi Yehuda and the Chum Sefer, and really the Ephraim Margolius and the Hakdama to Tiv Gittin says it, and the Nachla Shiva, meaning all these Gedolei Achronim were saying that two names seems to be some sort of new phenomenon that doesn't exist. And he goes through a real deep dive into, it's an incredible ga'inus, what this is, but it's not fun to read, but it's an incredible ga'inus of all sorts of names throughout Shas and Paiskim and Psukim and Divrei Yamim and different Nevi'im and names, etc. Very, very deep dive to show that there definitely was some. Now, the truth is that Kuli Haiva Ulai, because the Chum Sefer speaks very decisively, but Lamashal Rabbi Moshe, when he writes this in the Tshuva, Rabbi Moshe says it was very uncommon. Meaning, all this does is show you that there might have been an exception here or there. It doesn't show you that it was common. Meaning, the truth of what the Chum Sefer and the Nadi is saying stands. It's an obvious truth. Meaning, look through the Torah, look through the Shas, look through the early Rishonim and Paiskim. You'll see that there are no two names. It's not common at all. You want to know if you could maybe eke out a few, exceptions, maybe with all sorts of creative, wiggle room. Now, it's a ga'inus. It's really a ga'inus piece, but it doesn't. Now, what he does collect at the end, which is very interesting, he says, "Oid tziyin Chum Sefer l'divrei Bal Nachla Shiva, shehizkir inyan shem mishnayim kedavar zar." Chum Sefer brings from the Nachla Shiva that it's like a strange thing. And the Chum Sefer is learning from there that even in the modern era, so to speak, the relatively modern era, 1500s, 1600s, it was still very strange. He says, "V'zeh mafli." He says, to me, that's shocking. And over here he proceeds to bring a list of 20 names who had two names, some more famous than others. Rabbi Avram Avigdor of Montpellier, Rabbi Leo Menachem of Londonish, these are Balei Taisvis. Ani Yosef Avram, I don't know who that is, Huna Maresh Kalusa, Rav Hillel Melech, Rav Zalman Nassan, Rav Chaim Elezer. In the Chuvas Rashba, there's Rav Chaim Paltiel, he's a shoyl to the Rashba, Rav Chaim Shneyer, Yehuda Zakkai, Yosef Chaim. And here's where he gets to one that I want to discuss for a second. Then he brings Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael is a problem. Because Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael is brought down in Taisvis, in Chulin, and in Ksubis, and Sefer Yasher to Rabbeinu Tam, more places. Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael is one of the Balei Taisvis. He's a contemporary of Rabbeinu Tam, which means he lived like in the 1100s. It's a very long time ago, way before the Chasam Sefer's era, way before the Marshal, way before the Nedi B'Yehuda, way before all this Nachla Shiva, way before all that we're talking about. And he seems to be someone with a real prominent case of two names. And what do you do with Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael? He's quoted in Taisvis and Chulin. He's called to Rabbeinu Yaakov Yisrael Tiritz, or Rabbeinu Yaakov Yisrael. Meaning that's his name. That's how he's referred to. So what do you do with this one? Meaning the rest of them are more, not to me to say, but more minor figures. Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael is quoted in Taisvis 3-4 times. That's already a major person to deal with. What's with these two names? So there's a very interesting thing. Either you could just say it's an exception. Okay, it's easy. It's an exception. Yeah, there was one person, Ergitzvu, who had two names. What do you say? Yaakov Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu didn't have them at the same time. It's not the same name. If I care, it was a swap, right? Yaakov got Yisrael doesn't mean Yaakov. Yaakov means Yaakoveni, right? The both of these names have reasons. Yaakov is eight milashon Akev, and Yisrael is milashon Sarisa, right? They're not the same taich. Punk, the same person, had both of those names in his lifetime. No, if I cared, he was Leikara Shimcha Oid Yaakov Kiyim Yisrael. You should not be called Yaakov. You're only called Yisrael. It's not.
So how do we call Yaakov?
So that's a good question, but because it's not us to call him that, but so the Kleisenberg Rebbe the Vyatzev has a very interesting tshuva. He has a tshuva about the phenomenon of two names, and in there he says as follows. He says, "Abuguf ha'ras chalach some sefer." Whoever the shoyl to the Kleisenberg Rebbe was ma'ir from this Rabbeinu Yaakov Yisrael. Sha'isif gam shebapoiskim l'nizker echad b'beis shemes b'as achas. You raise the point that there's a Baal Taisis of Yaakov Yisrael. This will be over in 2 minutes. I'm sorry. I got to get to the end there. That there's a Baal Taisis of Yaakov Yisrael. Bashkafa Rishayni, he says, Allah B'daiti, Shu'ulai Yisrael L'Shem Shenitaisav L'Machmas Chayli. The first thing he says that popped into my head was Mistama Yisrael was a name they added to him when he was sick, this Baal Taisis. He got sick and he got an extra name. Ayin Ramah Yeredesh and Lamed Hey. And if the Ilm's not tired, we'll continue. We could talk about Shinei Hashem for Chayla. It's another separate topic. But he says, that's what I thought originally. He says, Mama oid samachti. I was so happy. Shematzasi b'Sefer HaYashar l'Reinu Tam. I found the tshuva in Sefer HaYashar from Reinu Tam. And Simon Tafresh Lamed Beis. Shal Reb Yaakov Yisrael Reinu Tam. That's the name of the Shaila. But tshuva sham, kasab b'Shainai. Reinu Tam writes to Ma ekov l'Reb Yaakov. Yikav hadin l'Yoshev Meidan. Upirish Hashem Yikvenu b'Shem Chadash Yisrael Yishemecha v'Ani Shmi Kishimcha v'Chulu Ayin Sham. He sounds like in this heading to the tshuva, there's a discussion of the change in his name. He refers to him as Rabbeinu Yaakov, same as my name, Rabbeinu Yaakov Tam. You have the same name as me, but now we're going to change your name to Yisrael. Yishimcha v'Ani Kishimcha, something like that. He says, Nir Lahedi, he says, the Shmai Yaakov. It seems like from the tshuva that Rabbeinu Tam's writing to him, his name was always Yaakov. But v'nitaysev le'Hashem Yisrael, v'ulei Rabbeinu Tam nasan l'Hashem machmas chaylev. Maybe the rabbi who changed his name and gave him a second name when he was sick was Rabbeinu Tam Gufa. Rabbeinu Tam is the one who gave it to him, this name. I am Berma. Chaim Pashresh. Then he brings another raya. He says, "V'chipasti matzasi b'sefer Yashar Rabbeinu Tam chelik hatshuvas shenitfas b'Berlin b'shnas Tafresh Shemchas." He did a little research, this is like archival research is not common for a Chassidish Pesach Rebbe to write. Like I found the other Ksavyad from Berlin. This is like a whole different type of research. Im Tikunim v'Hagoyis from Ram Zal Margalis v'Sham b'Sim Non Gimel hu v'Hach Tshuva l'Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael v'Magia Sham Heir Kvar Raz. And the Magia writes this and he says Ayin Sham, and he found another raya to his theory. So the Kleisenberg Rebbe hypothesizes that maybe the reason Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael got two names was he was not someone who was born with two names. He was someone who had one name. Eventually he got sick in his life, and Rabbeinu Tam, who was the Gadol Hadar, gave him a second name. Now, Rabbi Nasha Klein in Mishnah Halachas also has in Chelik Hey a long tshuva about this. There's no real new information there that is not in other places. It's really just like slightly new reworking of some of the old information. There's nothing really new there, but he does bring one ironic detail. He says that the Achronim, who are against two names, so to speak, To say against is too strong, but the Chassam Sofer, who Kilu denotes that it's a new phenomenon, it's not something that existed, named his own child Avram Shmuel Ben Yamin. The Chassam Sofer's Bechar is Avram Shmuel Ben Yamin. He named him 3 names, no less. For example, the Munkatcher Rebbe, the Minchas, what did he say?
When did he come out with the sheet?
The Chassam Sofer was married once for a bunch of years, didn't have any children. At 49 years old, his wife died, and he married Rukvega's daughter. The Chassam Sofer was 50 years old when he had his first child. I'm going to presume Roiv Teirase was already in the tank. You know what I'm saying? At 50 years old, I think he was a Fartig. I'm saying the Chassam Sofer was probably Fartig mentioned at 20, but at 50, I think we could assume Roiv Teirase was there already. He named his Bechar Avram Shmuel Ben Yamin. It's ironic. It's just ironic that the Chassam Sofer writes in that tshuva. Similarly, the Munkatcher Rebbe, the Minchas Elazar, who himself had 2 names, who in the Mukei Arachaim is not so into 2 names, named his Einikel, who was born B'chayev. Now, he didn't name him, but in a Rebbe's Mishpacha, you know what I'm saying, the Einikel it was his first Einikel. The Minchas Elazar had one daughter who got married late and didn't have children right away. It was like a tremendous simcha when an Einikel was born in Munkach, and they named the child Tzvi Nas and David. Again, 3 names. So it's just ironic that a lot of the Gedolei Chaim that write about it, and like we mentioned in the beginning, the Chazon Ish himself, and the Chazon and the whole Mishpachas Kanievsky. So suffice to say that Bizmanenu, it's a widely accepted thing, and although there is on the margins there are some people who question it, are not such big fans, but by and large it's a very accepted thing. And even though maybe it truly only started becoming popular 300-400 years ago, really not more than that, which is like a chiddush for something like this, that this happened, but it happened. So now it's here. Okay, there is more to do about names. We'll see.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.